Salvati Discipuli. Today's lesson is from the second lesson in chapter 19 in Latin for the new millennium. And you're going to learn how to form the perfect passive indicative. Okay, so you already know how to do the present, imperfect, and future active and passive, right? You already know how to do the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect active. Now, this is the first of 3 lessons that are going to teach you how to do the perfect passive, pluperfect passive, future perfect passive. And actually, at the end of this, you will then know how to fully conjugate the verb in the indicative mood. Okay, so this is the final countdown. You're finally getting to the end where you now can fully conjugate an indicative verb. Okay. All right. A couple of things to tell you about the perfect passive indicative. Okay. This is the first verb form that you guys are learning that is made up of 2 words. Okay. So the perfect passive indicative is made up of 2 words. The first word is the perfect passive participle. Okay. And the second word is one of the present forms, or the word is one of the words in the present conjugation of the verb to be. Okay, couple things to remember. The first word, okay, the perfect passive participle, it's being used as the main verb in the sentence when used with that second word, the present conjugation to be. And it means that you have to change the ending on the participle to match the gender and the number of the subject. Okay, so we're going to look at how this works as we go on in the presentation, but just know that it's going to be the 4th principal part with one of the nominative endings on it. The singular nominative endings, either us, or if you have a singular perfect passive indicative verb, or ei, if you have a plural perfect passive indicative verb. Okay. The perfect passive indicative translates 2 ways, either was blanked or has been blanked, have been blanked, something like that. And that makes sense, right? Because the perfect active indicative translates just the simple past or have blanked or has blanked, right? So, for example, the verb to love and the perfect active indicative is I loved or I have loved. In the passive, it can either be translated I was loved or I have been loved. Okay, so 2 acceptable translations of the perfect passive indicative. Let's look at this in chart form because this might help us sort of conceptualize what this should look like. The perfect passive participle is the first word for each of these. And then the second word is either sum, if it's first person singular, s if it's second person singular, est if it's third person singular, summus if it's first person plural, estis if it's second person plural, and sunt if it's third person plural. Now remember, these aren't endings. These are 2 different words, okay? The perfect passive participle is the first word. The present conjugation of sa is the second word. Okay, so as always, let's look at a paradigm. You should be writing these 2 charts, this one and the next one, in your notes so that you have an example to go back and look over, okay? So if you want to say I was held or I have been held, then you would say tentus or tenta or tentum sum, okay? So if it's a female who's saying I was held, you would say tenta sum. If it was a male, you'd say tentus sum. Tentum, you're not going to see pretty much at all in the first or second person, right? Because it's neuter. Usually neuter things do not speak. But you will see the neuter in the third person, okay? Second person singular, tentus s. So you were held or you have been held. Tentus est, he was held, she was held, it was held, or he, she, it has been held. Okay. Tentii summus, we were held, or we have been held. Tentii estis, you were held, y'all were held, y'all have been held. and teneō, sunt. Okay. Now, again, you're not going to use each one of these. You're not. If you want to say "I was held," you don't say "tentus, tenta, tentum, sum." You choose the ending that is the same number and gender as your subject, and then that's the ending you put on it. It's only 2 words, so tenta sum, something like that. I also give you the example petō, petere, petīvī, petītum. So our first word is the 4th principal part. Petitus sum or petita sum, I was sought. Petitus or petita est. Petitus or petita or petitum est. Okay. And then also in the plural. Okay. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware of when you're translating the perfect passive indicative is that the first word is the perfect passive participle. So you have to pay attention if any given use of this perfect passive participle is going to be in the perfect passive indicative or if it's actually the participial use of it. Now, if you see this perfect passive participle with the form of the verb to be, it's going to be the perfect passive indicative. Okay, so keep that in mind. You have to be paying attention. I should also point out one other thing. You're not always going to see the perfect passive indicative structured the same way. So for example, in this sentence, dona in agris occultata sunt. Okay, I could have said dona sunt in agris occultata. Now that's still the perfect passive indicative, but we can split up the 2 words. That can happen in Latin. So you also need to be aware of that possibility as well. Okay. Let's look at how to translate the perfect passive indicative. Dona in agris occultata sunt. So we know that this is 3rd person plural because we have the sunt, right? 3rd person plural. Perfect passive indicative. We also know that our subject, if we have one, is going to be neuter plural because the A can only be the nominative plural ending for a neuter, agreeing with a neuter noun. We do have a neuter noun in the nominative plural. That's dona. So we're going to translate this as the subject of occultata sunt. The gifts have been hidden or were hidden in agris, in the fields. So remember, you can translate this perfect passive indicative either as were hidden or have been hidden. Either way is fine. Let's look at the second sentence. Itaque adactis quaesita sum. And so, quaesita sum, I was sought, or I have been sought, adactis, by learned men. Okay? And then our last sentence, rege crudeli deleti estus. Notice that we have the singular feminine ending for quaesita sum. We have a plural ending on our perfect passive participle with our plural verb. This is 2nd person plural, perfect passive indicative. And it's going to translate y'all were destroyed or y'all have been destroyed, rege crudeli, by the cruel king. You can have an ablative of agent, obviously, because this is a passive verb, just a different tense of the passive. And you very often are going to, okay? So keep that in mind too. You should be looking out for that. All right, that's it. That's the perfect passive indicative. We will do a paradigm tomorrow in class. So take good notes. Make sure you're listening and writing. Make sure you're pushing pause if you need to. And I will see you in class tomorrow. Walete!